Welcome in to First Things First. I'm Sarah Kustok, filling in for Jenna Wolfe. That's Chris Broussard. That's Doug Gottlieb, filling in for Chris Carter and Nick Wright. How you guys doing?
Good.
You're on East Coast time. Everyone's all transitioned.
I'm ready now. I'm
you were ready. You were both ready yesterday.
Sure.
We fly and travel so much across country that I just ignore the time.
Yeah, I'm a very good sleeper, with the exception of 2 nights ago. But last night I was out.
Out?
Yeah, I got
What
good
time?
5 hours.
5? Okay.
11 or so.
All right.
Maybe 10.
All right.
I don't really remember. I was asleep.
Big day, big night for you two. Also for LeBron, and that's where we start opening a new public school in Akron. And next year will be a big season for LeBron James, entering year 16 of his career and his first with the Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron was asked by Rachel Nichols how he feels about going into a new situation in one of the last years of his prime.
I don't even look at it like that, because I don't feel like this is one of the last years of my prime. I think that's another statistic number, and I've always been a part of beating the odds in life. So being around my kids it gives me even more and more time in my youth.
So Chris, LeBron doesn't feel like he's yet in his prime, but how much longer do you feel like he has left?
Well, first of all,
years?
let me give a big shout out to LeBron James. I mean, what he's doing with this school is just tremendous. I actually think he is laying a new blueprint for what modern day African American athletes could do to help the community. So big congratulations to him. I know he's proud of this moment. I'm proud of him. That's a tremendous thing he's doing. So as far as basketball, LeBron already is doing stuff that's unprecedented. You know, for a guy to, some would say, had his best offensive season ever in his 15th year, we all acknowledge, I believe you believe, he's still the best player in the world. You think Kevin Durant, right?
Yeah, I would
Do
say,
you?
I would say Kevin Durant. Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, being in the conversation.
Yeah.
And regarded by most as still the best player in the world in his 15th, entering his 16th season, that's incredible. So he's already denying father time a little bit and all that. When you look back at some guys, Karl Malone was an Iron Man. Kobe Bryant was an Iron Man. Kobe Bryant, I believe, was still in his prime, if you look at his numbers, in his 17th year. His 17th year, Kobe averaged 25 points, shot 46% from the floor, 27 points, 6 assists, almost 6 rebounds a game. 46%, that was one of Kobe's best shooting performances of his career in his 17th year. LeBron has even been more physically, healthy than Kobe. He works just as hard. We know he spends, $1.5 million a year on his body. So I'm going to give him at least the next 2 years as a top 3 player. So I'm going to say next 3 years. So 3rd year of this contract, he's still a top 5 player. And I think in his 4th year of this contract, his last year, you'll begin to see some noticeable decline. But he'll still be an elite player, maybe top 10, somewhere around there. But I think he's got 3 strong years as a top 5 player left.
I'm still struggling with the glare I got from Sarah. But when I said I think Kevin Durant might be the best player in the league, she's like, really?
I'd heard it before, so I let it go.
I'm not ready for that yet.
Well, I've seen the NBA Finals the last 2 years, and matching up, LeBron didn't guard him as much, but I thought Durant is in fact better, even if I was blown away.
He got a little more help.
Well, sure. Again, it's a really hard measurement, because when Durant didn't have as much help early in the playoffs without Steph Curry, he wasn't as profound in terms of the overall points, but he took over a game in a different way. And I do think that LeBron gets a little bit of a pass for the fact that he's gotten smarter defensively. He's not doing as much. He's taking more plays off.
Yes.
So instead of getting into an argument over who's the best player, let's just talk about LeBron in his prime. It is unprecedented. We do the 15 years in a row. And the reason he can't match it up with Jordan is Jordan went to college for 3 years, right? And then Jordan took a year and a half off to play baseball. Yeah. So he's had this unbelievable run. He's also never been hurt. You mentioned Kobe, the 5 or 6 knee surgeries, then, of course, the Achilles injury. Jordan had the early injury to his foot in second year. But if you compare in terms of age, right, in terms of age with Michael Jordan, Jordan, when his last year with the Bulls, which for me, I don't even pretend the Wizards. The Wizards was, I was just trying to prove that I could still play, which he proved.
Which he did.
He could still play after taking a couple years.
Legitimate all-star.
Correct. So I look at it and I think, all right, what's reasonable? What's reasonable is what Jordan did, which is he averaged 28 a game. He wasn't maybe.
You're talking about just for this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for this year, I think he's going to be. He's learned to be more efficient. He's learned to pick his spots. I think that one of the things you can see with this Lakers roster is he's formulated in a way in which at times he'll play the small ball five, which is what he did at times against the Warriors in the finals. It allows him to guard, frankly, inferior players. You can tell me whatever you want about Draymond Green, but Draymond Green is not Kevin Durant. And if you're LeBron James, you can slough off of Draymond Green. You can slough off of some of these small ball fives and catch your breath and be a help side defender, as well as at the offensive end, you have a mismatch. You're guarding guys that are converted power forwards, and they're trying to guard one of the greatest players to ever play the game, if not the greatest player to ever play the game, depending on where you sit in that debate. So I think he's getting smarter. I think he's using footwork better. I think he is going to play some out of the post so he doesn't have to dominate the ball. He doesn't have to show his explosiveness. I think he's got a good 3 years. I think the fourth year is not going to be. I think the fourth year is not going to be great. I think a lot of it is going to come down to who he surrounds himself with. But the most important thing to remember with LeBron is he is a student of the game, and he understands that it didn't work with Kobe. You can't be the scorer as you get older. That doesn't age that well. You got to depend upon others and pick your spots. And if you look at the numbers, he's become more efficient, not because he's truly always better. Some of it is the rules of the game. Some of it is spacing out the court, taking the centers and power forwards away from the game. But some of it is also the fact that he understands how to pace himself. And so even though he played 82 games, he didn't practice. He didn't exhaust himself. This year, I don't think he plays 82 games. I think he plays in the 70s or so. I think he'll limit his practice time. I think he'll take plays off defensively. So statistically, there won't be the drop-off. And I don't think in year 4 it's going to be, remember Jason Kidd in his last run in the playoffs when he couldn't make a layup? I don't think we're going to see. He's not going off a cliff. But I think you're going to see a gradual decline in athleticism. And as long as he doesn't get hurt, I think his style of play, to which he wants to make others better, I think has a longer staying power than other superstars of his ilk.
Well, his three-point shot shooting is getting better. Last year, surprisingly, he ran the floor really well. I mean, he got out on the break, and if he still wants to do that, he can certainly do that with Lonzo Ball and Rondo and guys like that. So I'm with you. I actually think he's going to play past this contract. I don't think this will be his final contract. So I think, like you said, year 4, he's coming down a little bit, but I could see him playing a 5th year as well.
Let me ask you, okay? You cover the Eastern Conference, right? I mean, there's a little bit of a difference athletically, but there's the sports continuum, right? Your basketball IQ is to this side. When you start, you have your athletic ability. He's not Peyton Manning at the end, right? Where Peyton Manning couldn't throw a football.
Not even close to the end.
But he is. But athletically, he's not the same as he was a couple years ago.
He had some.
No,
I mean,
but that goes
I don't know
back
if you were at
to
that
picking
Brooklyn
his
game.
spots. Absolutely.
He had that dunk over like 3 people,
which is insane. But that's him picking a spot. I think there was some tracking data that came out, and he laughed at it as he should have. But tracking data that came out throughout the course of the season saying he was one of it, and it was a certain group with numbers, but he ran the least amount of miles or covered as much. No, however, it's to your point, it's a savviness and understanding of when to run or what to do. What I'm curious to see with the Lakers is, do they actually stylistically change how they do? We've seen LeBron surrounded by shooters, him being the playmaker, him with the ball in his hands so much with what they've put together with the roster, with the different players, with guys who can create for himself. Do they change how he plays? Does he play out of the post more?
They're not built to play that way with him handling the ball 70% of the time and shooters around. They don't have the shooters to put around him.
No, but that is where he thrives. So how do they change that? And the roster may change.
I mean, the guys, look, don't think the Lakers just brought in Lance Stevenson, Rajon Rondo, and all these guys without LeBron's blessing. I actually think LeBron pointed out many of these guys. So he is looking at playing a different type of way, too. there was talk, and I'll talk to people close to him, when he was thinking about going to Philadelphia, okay, with Ben Simmons, I'll play more off the ball. I think he feels, Lonzo's not Ben Simmons, but he is a smart, high IQ player who I think LeBron would trust to make some of the right plays. So I expect, and as he gets older, he should be off the ball more. That'll make him more efficient. He could be dynamic in the post with the lack of great post defenders in the game today. He'd usually have a smaller man on him if he goes down there. With his court vision passing ability, he could really be devastating in the post. So I think you'll see him playing a different type of game, still handling the ball, of course, but I think he'll be off it more.
I'll just say this. Everyone says, well, you play out of the post, and he obviously showed his ability to hit that fadeaway jump shot time and again in the playoffs. And some of that's the influence of Kobe Bryant. They become actually really close, and that Kobe has said, hey, look at Mike. He played out of the post. I played out of the post. It's a way to be efficient and to use all the skills that you have. The one thing is, his footwork is not what their footwork was. And that's an old dog, new tricks. It's really, really hard. I don't think he'll ever be great out of that post, but the difference is, and this can't be pointed out enough, is that the game has changed so much. You're not going against traditional post players.
He can bully guys.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct. You can still play bully ball, and it's going to be interesting to see how he adjust his body. Does he play lighter? Does he stay heavy? I think all of these things are fascinating. It's as interesting to watch as the overall win total with the Lakers.
And he puts so much thought into all this. So it's not going to just flippantly be how he shows up. All right, we're switching to the NFL because coming up, we hear the real reason Terrell Owens is bailing on his Hall of Fame speech. That's next on First Things First. Moving on to football, Seahawks rookie linebacker Shaquem Griffin jumps the route, picks off Russell Wilson at Seattle's training camp. What do you think?
I think Russell Wilson kind of stared him down there. A little bit.
Nice play. Yeah.
It was an excellent play. Legion of Boom going to look very, very different with all the departures and retirements.
Finally, defensive end Chandler Jones at Cardinals training camp, already in midseason form, absolutely destroying the blocking sled.
Yeah, see, I think this feels like it's made in China. This is just another reason to increase the tariffs, right? Because Chandler Jones is awesome, but I never think of Chandler Jones as some sort of dynamics. That feels like a build quality.
Doug, that's what I want to see.
Well, no, he does beast this thing.
That's what I want to see.
That's kind of easy.
If I'm a coach, I don't know, Doug.
But he's not a.
I've hit one of those. You ever hit one of those things before?
He's a speed guy, huh? Have I?
Yeah, a little bit of resistance.
All right, moving on. NFL Hall of Fame ceremonies. The class of 2018 will be inducted this weekend with Terrell Owens not in attendance. Owens will hold his own ceremony in Chattanooga, where he played in college.
His own ceremony.
President of Pro Football Hall of Fame, David Baker, tried to explain T.O.'s planned absence.
What he told me was that he's upset that he feels disrespected, that he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. My conversations with him, I'll tell you, they've been good, and they've been very respectful. And I disagree. I'd love for him to be here because I think he would finally get the honor that he's always wanted. Having said that, he's a grown man. I respect his decision.
Doug, is T.O. making a mistake not attending the ceremony?
Of course. Of course, because he's making it about himself. He's taking the shine away from other rightful Hall of Famers. I have no respect for this decision.
You think he's taking the shine away? Because
I don't think I know.
Are people really going to pay attention to him at Tennessee Chattanooga?
No, but right now we're discussing Terrell Owens, not any of the other Hall of Famers. He's been discussed ad nauseum when all of the shows of us yackers, in which we talk about T.O., and we don't talk about anybody else.
We wouldn't be talking about them anyway right now, would we?
I don't know.
Honestly.
Probably not. But we're talking about T.O., who's chosen not to show up because he felt dissed. Look, wide receivers have been dissed by the Hall of Fame for years. He's not the first. He won't be the last. Our own Chris Carter didn't get in first ballot, didn't get in second ballot. And look, T.O.'s attitude, his persona, the way in which everywhere he left, even though he was incredibly productive, there was always this sense of like, yeah, we're kind of better without him. The locker room kind of operates better without him. All of these things. Like, look, he was disrespectful to the star. He was disrespectful to the Eagles when he got run out of town after helping them in the Super Bowl, coming back early from injury. He's a complex and conflicted guy. But bringing this noise to the Hall of Fame, bringing attention away from the Hall of Fame ceremony. When they finally put you in, he should be like Voldemort. He should be the guy that we're just not even mentioning leading up to it. Instead, talking about the rightful Hall of Famers. And if he doesn't want to be there to accept his bust, why should he even be in the Hall of Fame? He got in under a loophole. Don't be surprised if they change it. Hey, look, man, if you're physically able to be here, you got to be here to accept this incredibly prestigious award. Right? There's like 300 Hall of Famers in all of the world. And we got together and decided you're one of them. And you're like, nah, I got something better to do. I'm going to do some of my own time. How dare this guy? That's Terrell Owens. He's the ultimate and egomaniacal wide receiver who wants to take attention from everybody else. And so I feel like we're almost wasting our time talking about him right now.
Well, I do agree with you that he's making a mistake in not being there. He should definitely be there. But first, he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. Can we agree on that?
Why?
He was tremendous.
Okay.
That's it. But you have guys who have broken the law. You have guys who have harmed people who became first ballot Hall of Famers.
Marvin Harrison should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. He was
T.O. was. Look at his numbers.
I understand. If you go by the go by the numbers, Carmelo Anthony should be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And he will.
He should not because his
Why
team.
not?
Because he ruined teams.
Okay, hold on. How is he ruined? T.O. was in 8 playoffs of his 15 years. This notion that he was on bad teams and ruined teams just isn't true. He was on 8 playoff teams, some pretty good teams. Obviously never won a Super Bowl. What team got better when he left?
The Eagles were in the playoffs before he got there. The Eagles were in the playoffs after he got there.
Were they in the Super Bowl?
Well, no.
Okay.
No.
He helped them get to the Super Bowl
he also,
and put on a yeoman's performance when he got there.
He did. He
also, a broken leg?
And then he called out his quarterback afterwards. Who does that?
Okay,
Terrell Owens does that.
I'm with you on that stuff.
He was a divisive factor within the locker room.
But what team got better when he left?
What team got better?
Yeah, when he left.
Look, I have to go back and track in terms of the Dallas Cowboys, but that experience.
Whether or not you think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, right now, the fact that he is not showing up at the ceremony, do you think that that's a mistake?
It's a mistake, no question. Sometimes you win, many times, if not all times, by being the bigger man.
Yes.
Okay, you be the bigger man. He's not hurting the writers who did not put him in on the first try or the second try by not showing up. Okay, and forgiveness. I mean, I get it why he's mad. I think he has a right to be mad because I think he definitely deserved to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But those writers aren't losing sleep over Terrell Owens going to UT Chattanooga and holding his ceremony there. Okay, they've moved on. It's eating him up, and until he lets that go, it's going to continue to eat him up. So. And look, like you said, I think he could have won a lot of people over.
Correct.
By we never forget you're a Hall of Famer. Whenever he's on a TV show, we're always going to remember he's a Hall of Famer. Whenever anybody goes to Canton to visit, they're going to see his bust and all his stats and all of that stuff. But one thing maybe the thing most people remember more than anything is the Hall of Fame speech. Deion Sanders, our own Chris Carter, Shannon Sharp. They gave Michael look, some of the best moments these guys have had is in these speeches. If he could have just been honest, even talk about why he was hurt. Talk about, he loves to talk about the misperception that he was a bad teammate. Address that, but not in anger.
Well,
Correct. So we're giving you the opportunity.
Chance.
But you mentioned Michael Irvin, also not a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he absolutely should have been. That was off the field stuff. Okay, off the field stuff kept him out. Bullet Bob Hayes, Art Monk, lots of guys waited, and they handled it with class and decorum. And I'm not saying that he doesn't belong in. And the truth is that if you really want to get down to it, in Hall of Fames, you should either be in the first ballot or you're either a Hall of Famer or not a Hall of Famer. You're not one of these he wasn't a Hall of Famer the first 5 years, but then the 6th year suddenly, then he was a Hall of Famer.
Under that category or criteria, he's a Hall of Famer.
No, I'm not disputing that.
We are all saying that we believe it's a mistake. T.O. has said that he'll come out later with more details about his decision. Do you think that T.O. will regret that? You talk about the speeches, and that's something will he himself regret not actually being here?
Of course he will. course he will. Who wouldn't, right? I think he's living a life of regret. I think right now at some point in your life, you're going to sit there and go like, man, I should have handled that San Francisco thing and not called out Jeff Garcia better. Man, I probably shouldn't have done bicep curls and sit-ups in the driveway in Philadelphia. Man, I should, because, like, look, if it doesn't ring true right now.
He's going to regret
when
that.
I don't know if he can really run a 4.4, but suppose he can still run a 4.4. Yeah. Now, he can run a 4.4. And he wants to play football, and no one wants to hire him in the NFL. If that doesn't tell you that there's other
40,
stuff.
What? How old is he? Yeah, 40-something. No, it matters.
Yeah.
That matters.
I mean, like, look, his hands were wildly overrated if you look at his actual catch rate, whatever. But, yes, at some point in his life, he will regret the fact that he didn't stand up on stage with that jacket on, looking at his bust, and getting to tell his own story. Instead, he tried to do it his own way. He's trying to fight the system, to which the system finally accepted him. Even if they did so begrudgingly so, and it is a mistake, and he'll rue the day.
And the thing is, many people have changed the perception of them post-career. Now, Charles Barkley didn't have a terrible image because, of the Olympics and the Dream Team. But, he did do some things. I mean, spit on a fan, threw a guy through a window. Now he's beloved. There are many stories like that. You mentioned Michael Irvin. He became beloved, so that can happen with a lot of guys, and it could have happened with T.O. had he been there at the Hall of Fame. Okay, coming up, why didn't LeBron James push for a Kawhi Leonard trade to the Lakers? Hear it from him next on First Things First. First things first, and we are going viral. Big Ben to Antonio Brown has been one of the most potent combos in the NFL since they teamed up in 2010. Now we have their heirs. Check this out. Big Ben's son completing a pass to Antonio's son. How cool is that? That was a long pass, too.
That's not too bad.
For guys that size.
We need to find out how old they are.
Ben Roethlisberger didn't play quarterback till his senior year in high school, right? Didn't play quarterback till his senior year in high school.
I didn't know that. Not too bad. I like it.
Wisdom from Doug Gottlieb.
All right.
I think the coach's son was the reason why, but...
Time for stories to start your morning. The Nationals have made Bryce Harper available in trade talks ahead of today's 4 p.m. deadline. Harper has struggled this season, hitting just .220, but he does have 25 home runs. Doug, do you think that Bryce Harper gets traded?
He should get traded. Look, the Nationals need to clean house. This team just feels tired. They're waiting on his exodus. They've massively underachieved. I know they made the playoffs 4 out of 6 years, and losing in elimination games, those can go either way, but there's just bad mojo. They keep getting a new manager. They don't buy into the new manager. You got to get prospects, and sometimes you got to hit reset, especially when expectations are he signs a huge deal elsewhere. Maybe offer him a 1-year deal so you don't have to worry about the offseason. If not, trade him today and get some prospects for the future.
Look, if you could keep him, if you can keep him beyond this, he's 25 years old. I'd love to keep him. There was a great moment he had with the fans at the Home Run Derby and the All-Star game and all that. But if the foregone conclusion or all signs are pointing to him leaving, whether it's Chicago, whether it's New York, wherever, then you have to trade him and get something for him. And he's actually starting to hit more over the last couple of weeks, so maybe you get more for him.
To the NBA, Dwight Howard says he chose the Wizards over the Warriors in free agency. He said John Wall's pitch is what helped sway him to Washington. Chris, are you buying this from Dwight?
Well, he said they called, so that's easy to check. So I don't know that he'd say that if that weren't true, but that was probably due diligence. If the Warriors indeed did call, it was just due diligence. Look, I think Washington's a good place for him if he will finally, Doug, accept and be focused on what he does best, which is defense and rebounding. His numbers actually were really good last year. 16 points, 12.5 boards.
You know who he is?
Just focus on the rebounding.
He's Terrell Owens. He's Terrell Owens in a basketball uniform. Statistically, he's absolutely positively a first ballot Hall of Famer. He once took the Orlando Magic to the NBA Finals, but everywhere
back then he wasn't T.O.
Everywhere he goes. Yes, he was.
In Orlando?
What do you mean he's T.O.?
No, in Orlando, he was at the end, of course.
At the end?
At the end, it was bad.
Of the most awkward endings ever.
But early in his career in Orlando, he was great.
Early in T.O.'s career in San Francisco, he was great.
But T.O. wasn't leading a team to the finals, to the Super Bowl. You know what I mean?
My point is, here's a guy who statistically, it's inarguable he's a Hall of Famer. He even statistically had a great year last year, but Charlotte couldn't wait to get rid of him. What's better, the Warriors or the Wizards? I think he'll get more opportunity with the Wizards, frankly, than he would the Warriors. I do believe that the Warriors called, and I do think that the Warriors were surprised they could get DeMarcus Cousins, and I think that's the salary spot he filled.
To the Lakers now, LeBron might be getting a legend as a teammate, according to Shaq. Kobe Bryant's coming back to play with LeBron James. Doug, are you buying that Kobe is coming out of retirement?
No, and I have very, very, very good sources on this, that Kobe Bryant has zero desire to come back and play in the NBA. So this is Shaq doing the Shaq thing, calling attention to himself, throwing out something to throw you off the path. Hey, I want to break the story first. Kobe's coming back. Kobe's not coming back. He's not playing in the Big Three. He's not playing in the NBA. Kobe is fine being Kobe.
Can we please put this to bed? Because Shaq's not the only one in L.A. talking about Kobe coming back. I'm there. I'm in the city. And I hear people, just fans, just random fans, talking about this as if it really could happen. No, it's not going to happen, as you said. Kobe told us late in his career, you think I'm going to stay around and average 18, 19 points a game? No. Kobe Bryant went out in a blaze of glory, 60 points in his last game. Leave us with that impression. No, he's not coming back.
Here's your life goals, right? Find someone who either loves you the way that Nick loves LeBron James, or find someone that loves you the way that Laker fans love Kobe Bryant. You find that type of love in your life, you are in a really, really good place.
Leave it at that. Finally,
Sam, Nick knows I love him.
Beautiful.
Come on, man.
Well said. Finally, Sam Darnold finally showed up at Jets camp after signing his rookie deal. When Todd Bowles was asked about the rookie quarterback, the head coach said, quote, "I told him he was late." Chris, any chance Darnold should or could win the starting job?
Certainly a chance that he could. I mean, it's an open, Josh McCown isn't scaring anybody. I actually would like to see Teddy Bridgewater emerge as a starter. Remember, just a few years ago in Minnesota, people loved him. Now, I know he wasn't Carson Wentz or somebody like that, but as far as a leader, as far as a manager and a winner, he had all of that. So I'd like to see him emerge, let Darnold learn under him. However, it's open competition. Neither of these guys, Bridgewater or McCown, is tremendous. So if Darnold can go in there, and as I said yesterday, we've seen rookie quarterbacks kind of set a new bar. Like, some of them are expected to come in and play well right away, and they have. So I'll give him a shot. I don't think he'll start week one, but I think at some point in the season, he probably takes over.
He came jogging out, and all I could think of yesterday was it So I Married an Axe Murderer, right? Look at that huge head. Look at that. It looks like a giant orange on the toothpick. That's exactly what. But he is. Eric Mangini sits here oftentimes, and he calls people a force multiplier. That's what Sam Darnold is. Because, look, if you go and you look at the other quarterback prospects, does he have the highest football IQ? That's probably Baker Mayfield. Okay, does he have the most pure form and release? No, that's Josh Rosen. Does he have the strongest arm? No, that's Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. But there's something about Darnold from the moment he took the field at USC as a backup in the third game until the moment he walked out the door. He's a force multiplier. Yeah. He makes players around him better. He makes you feel kind of better about yourself. He's got that kind of quarterback thing. That said, he is not refined just yet. And I think that Josh McCown is the perfect guy to take the reins and take a beating early on the season. I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater has it, and I think that Teddy Bridgewater is their safety net. The problem with Teddy Bridgewater is 3 games, 10 days, start the season, surgically repaired knee, and we don't know if he has it, and we don't know if he can do it 3 times in 10 days. So I think it's McCown. I do think we see Bridgewater, and I think the Jets are very, very smart about this thing. But he's going to play because every coach knows that the 2 ways to keep your job are 1, to win, and then 2, if you can't win, play the youngest people possible. And then you can come before the meeting and go like, hey, look, we were really close today, but, man, we're so young at quarterback. He's 20 years old. He only played 1 year and 3 quarters in college as a starting quarterback. Yeah. He is the future. I think the future is bright, but I think they'd be wise to sit. The more he sits, the more likely he ultimately has success.
Speaking of young guys, LeBron James has some kids that he's going to be playing with the Lakers, and many were surprised that L.A. didn't go all in to trade for Kawhi Leonard, who had expressed his desire to play for the Lakers. Here's LeBron when asked by Rachel Nichols why he didn't push the organization to add Kawhi.
Because I love the young guys that they have. And, You know, I'm not trying to force my hand in no way, shape, or form. I believe Rob and Magic and Jeannie has done an unbelievable job of kind of reshaping what the organization should be in the last few years on, you know, keeping Dr. Buss, you know, his dreams and what he was all about, you know, to keep that going. So I feel like they know what's best for the team, and I wanted to be a piece to kind of continue that, continue that motion on being back, you know, to a championship franchise where they should be.
Chris, are you buying that LeBron didn't want to trade for Kawhi?
Well, he said it in that quote, I like the young guys. And he said it right, guys. Because that's what it would have taken to get Kawhi Leonard, if that would have even worked. I mean, San Antonio, and rightly so, understandably so, was asking for everything. Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, 3 draft picks. Like, no, you don't make that move. Now, if they could turn around and trade with Toronto and even trade Brandon Ingram and some picks for Kawhi Leonard, then I would say do it, and I'm sure LeBron would say, yes, do it. But he knew with what San Antonio was asking for, no, sit back and relax, because even if you got Kawhi Leonard, you're going to need depth to play with Golden State, to beat Golden State or have a chance. And by giving up all your young guys, you wouldn't have had that. So I think LeBron and the Lakers have made the right move right now. Now, come trade deadline, if things aren't going well in Toronto and they're ready to move Kawhi, and if they're going to lose him and they could get a Brandon Ingram for him, maybe they do that. So then you revisit. But to give up all of that, no, they did the right thing by waiting.
Let history be your guide. We all talk about how LeBron's a student of history. You and I, we've all covered the NBA. We remember when Carmelo Anthony wanted to be a New York Knick. Had he simply waited. Now, remember, the landscape was different. The collective bargaining agreement was set to expire. There was going to be a lockout. He didn't know what level he'd be paid at, but he got nervous, he got tight, and they forced the trade early to the New York Knicks. And the Knicks had a young, fun team, Danilo Gallinari and Raymond Felton. Again, this is in his prime, Raymond Felton. And remember, they had to
fit nicely around Melo.
Yeah, they had to pay a king's ransom to get Carmelo Anthony when they would have gotten him in the offseason. Right? And that of all the things that didn't allow the Knicks to live up to their potential when they had Carmelo Anthony, that was probably it. The Knicks would have been back. But they didn't wait, and Carmelo Anthony couldn't wait. LeBron James, I think, and Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson, I believe, are convinced that if they don't get Kawhi, there's still Jimmy Butler, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, you name it, the free agents are out there next season. But they believe that it's better off, let's see what these guys have. LeBron, you heard his own words. We played them for you earlier. He doesn't think he's at the end of his prime. The reality is at some point he's going to fade, but can they wait an extra year and get another free agent to go with the guys they already do have? Remember, they have the Luol Deng contract, which they can stretch. They're going to have the space in their salary cap with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and all these other guys being on a one-year deal. It's the smart play. It's the long play. It's the patient play. But if you look at the history just of the Knicks, when they had a good young roster and they chose to go all in on Carmelo Anthony a couple months early, that ended up, I know they won a couple of playoff series in the Eastern Conference, but truthfully, that was a failed experiment. Yeah. This is the opposite of that, and I think it's a smarter long-term play.
And in what way can it be a feel-out process? Because I know it was Summer League, but Josh Hart has a monster summer. We know what Brandon Ingram did last year, to see what Lonzo Ball does and Kyle Kuzma in their second, to see what guys actually fit around LeBron, which guys work best.
Well, this is the perfect example. Obviously, you cover the Nets as their lead analyst for your career. And so D'Angelo Russell's the perfect example, right? He puts up empty stats. They're probably better when he doesn't play, even though he's their leading scorer. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, honestly, LeBron wants to see it for himself, because Brandon Ingram seems to have some of the makings of a Kevin Durant type, but there's questions as to whether or not he has that dog in him. Who's going to know better than LeBron James playing 82 games? I'll know maybe after training camp or after the first 20 games, because as we all know, there's different levels to NBA games, right? There's NBA games that exist only in the bottom line in the box score, and then there's real NBA games that everybody watches. Now you're playing the real NBA with LeBron James on your team. He's going to know who's got the stuff that it takes to compete with him, with the Warriors, with the Rockets, with the Thunder in the future. And I think the only way to know is to play in those situations with Ingram. I think they think Hart has it, but they don't know if Hart is ultimately a starter or a bench player. Summer League is not real NBA. Lonzo Ball, there were some signs of him breaking through. year 2 plus playing with LeBron, it looks completely different when you're playing at the upper echelon of NBA games, and you're only going to know that by doing it with LeBron James.
That's what this season is about. Find out who's going to be your second star for this year. And then if you get a big-time free agent, who can be your third star? So see what Ingram, Kuzma, Ball are made of. Hart, like you said, I think Hart does have the right stuff. I'm not saying he's going to be a tremendous player, but he's a strong character player. He can shoot it. He can defend. I think he's smart basketball-wise. So he's solid. And if they fold under the pressure of a Lance Stevenson or the Rajon Rondo going at him in practice, Michael Beasley, then you know they're not made of the right stuff and you regroup. But that's what this season is about.
Well, it's no surprise. And he told Rachel Nichols last night when she asked about some of the, potentially head-scratching decisions they made and guys they acquired with a Lance or with a. He said these guys wake up and think about basketball. They want to play basketball. They're competitors.
That was. I mean, look, there are guys in the NBA that don't love the game. They like it and they love what it brings.
They're going to push these young guys.
But they will. They will. But look. San Antonio's got guys that love the game. Yeah. Houston's got guys that love the game. Golden State certainly has guys. So.
Well, and who's available though?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm just saying to love the game. That was. I get what they're doing. They're taking a page out of Houston Rockets' book defensively, and they looked at the playoffs and they saw Houston switched everything, forced it into a one-on-one isolation, get Golden State out of their motion offense and go one-on-one. And they think with these guys they're adding that they can do that defensively and give the Golden State Warriors maybe some problems.
They got some dog in them.
Yeah, they got some dog.
That's part. We touched on this yesterday. I don't know if I got an answer from you guys. What would deem a successful next year, just next year, not big picture, what would be a successful season, do you think, in the eyes of the Lakers?
Look, the West, I think there's Golden State. I still have Houston, even though they may have dropped off a little bit as the second team. And then I think, the Lakers, the Spurs, the Jazz, the Thunder,
Blazers.
The Blazers. Yeah,
Pelicans.
I mean, it's just a bunch of teams together, that are fighting for those last 6 spots. Yeah, and so
Mavericks.
You could finish in the 7th.
And the Clippers.
Yeah, I wouldn't put the Mavericks up in that group yet, or even the Clippers. I wouldn't put in that group. But if you could finish 7th and be a game and a half, 2 games out of the 3rd spot, just like last year. So, I've predicted 53 wins and LeBron's the MVP. That would probably put you in the top 4 seed.
If they have 53 wins, he will, in fact, be the MVP.
Yeah, they're going to have to win 50-plus for him to be the MVP.
Look, I just... It's the definition of pornography, right? You know it when you see it, right? You'll know a successful season when you see it, right? Or do we have? Well, remember last year his coach had to step away because of anxiety. They had to trade half the roster. So I would hate to put a number of wins.
But they have to make the playoffs.
They have to make the playoffs, and you can't be like an 8 seed, 7 seed fighting your way in. I feel like they got to be a solid playoff team. But again, you know it when you see it. If it feels like the momentum is, it's like a company. If it feels like the momentum is, they're not going to win a championship. I don't expect that. I think it's unrealistic to expect them to contend for a championship. But if you know it when you see it, if you feel like it's growing into something like, oh, you know what, Ingram, oh, you know what, Lonzo Ball, oh, KCP, they're a little bit better, a little bit further along than I thought, and it's going to work ultimately when they add another piece. You'll know it when you see it. I would say solid playoff team. I just hate to put a defined number around it because there's so many other variables we don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying they have to win 53 for it to be successful. That's what I'm predicting, but they have to make the playoffs. That's the
correct.
They have to do that. Maybe get to the second round.
All right, coming up, do the Giants have the best offense in the NFC? Some NFL scouts seem to think so. That is next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. Super Bowl champion Chris Canty joins us. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm bummed you don't have your ring on. But
why? You don't want to be that guy that wears a Super Bowl ring every single day.
How did I not realize
I wore it because I was going out to Giants training camp yesterday. It was cool to rap with some of the guys, but you can't wear a Super Bowl ring every single day. It takes away from it being special.
So
it's a Super Bowl ring.
Right.
How many of the guys were asking about it?
Oh, yeah, a lot of the guys that I sat down with, Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram, they were excited to see a Super Bowl ring, but they were telling me how they're looking forward to having a bigger one with more diamonds in it because they put the number of Super Bowl trophies on every single ring. So
Okay.
Hopefully, those guys get one that'll have five diamonds in it for 5 Super Bowls.
Let's try to make the playoffs first before you can start talking Super Bowl with the young guys.
Well, listen, I'm with you on that one, but the fact that you drafted a running back with the 2nd overall pick, that tells me that the Giants are expecting to compete for a championship.
Perfect. Oh, no Perfect tee up. You being at training camp.
Well,
Let's
I
talk
do this,
about
Sarah.
that. I like it. They're hoping for a bounce-back year after winning only 3 games last season. Their offense should be much improved with a healthy Odell Beckham and the selection of running back, as you mentioned, CC Saquon Barkley. When one NFL scout was asked how to stop them, he said, pray for injuries and bad weather. Chris, you were at training camp, as we mentioned. How dynamic is this Giants offense?
I had a chance to rap with Easy yesterday, and I asked him point blank, is this the best group of skill position players you had around you? And he said, on paper, they have the opportunity to be. They have the potential to be, but they got to go out there and they have to produce. But when you look at that group that the Giants have, it's as good as anybody in the National Football League. I mean, if you want to stack it up against the Killer Bees in Pittsburgh with Ben, Bell, and Brown, I mean, they're right there. Odell Beckham Jr., arguably one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. Saquon Barkley, based off of what we've seen from Penn State and the expectations when they drafted him with the 2nd overall pick, you expect him to be one of those running backs that they can move all around the field, not just in the backfield for 15 to 20 carries, but split him out, allow him to run routes, take advantage of mismatches against safeties and linebackers. And then you look at Evan Ingram, one of the most athletic young tight ends in the National Football League. He's noticeably bigger from a year ago, so he's one of those guys that took the offseason strength and conditioning program seriously. I look at this team and I say, you know, it's all there for the taking with the Giants. Of course, you have a quarterback that's competent, 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's 2-time Super Bowl MVP. If you give him time, and that's the big if with that offensive line. If you give him time, you know that he can operate the offense. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this Giants team is going to look like this year.
Look, you're right. The skill positions are incredible. And I think, we see the impact Beckham has on the offense, not just receiving-wise, but the running game. And with him being able to stretch the field and him so dynamic on the outside, defenses aren't going to be able to stack the box. That was, I won't say Barkley's problem at Penn State, but it was a problem because everybody just stacked the box, so his rushing numbers weren't as good as you might have thought. Now that's not going to happen, so he could be huge this year as a rookie. But they're going to be very tough. I think Eli is the question for me. And look, Eli, I know the 2 Super Bowls, but even in his prime, he wasn't the most accurate quarterback. Now, he's got a lot of weapons, and he should be good, but even if you just bypass what happened last year, he's 37 years old. Everybody's not going to be Tom Brady, you know, and Eli is the big question for me. What? Two playoff appearances in the last 9 years. You know, only twice in his career, 14 years, have they had a top 10 ranked offense with him at quarterback. He's obviously prone to throwing interceptions and making mistakes. So Eli's the question. I thought they should have taken Sam Darnold, let him learn under Eli this year. But that's the one question for me. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But if there's going to be a problem offensively, if everybody's healthy, I think it could be Eli.
It's one of those things where you can't put it all on Eli, but some of it you got to put on Eli, right? I mean, 27, 14, 16, 13, that's all interceptions, right? In the NFL, it has changed. You have to be efficient. You have to hold on to the football. Your running back's holding on to the football. What about your quarterback? And at 37 years old, and then there's the Eric Flowers. Like, can you hide a guy who can't block at left tackle at right tackle?
I've had tougher times getting around a turnstile in the subway. I'm just telling you, that's really what it is.
They act like the right side doesn't get aggressive.
No, look, I love Willie Hernandez feels like a really smart draft pick, right? And Nate Solder, you know, because his kid was sick and they end up getting him out of New England and he becomes your left tackle. Like, that's great. But you still got Eric Flowers over there. And you mentioned how we know how poorly he played and how much that affects Eli or any quarterback when you have somebody in your face. So I guess that's the question. You know lines better than all of us in the studio combined. Is that going to work?
Well, here's what I'll say about that. I give Eli the benefit of the doubt because of the resume, and I've seen him do it. Even when they made the playoffs a couple of years ago, the reason why they lost that game was not because of Eli's performance. It was because of drops from Odell Beckham Jr. and Sterling Shepard. But when you look at Eli's season last year, everybody argues that His skill set has diminished. Maybe he's not as efficient as he has been in years past, but he led the league in pass attempts with less than 2.5 seconds to throw the football. So, I mean, when you start talking about being under duress, it's hard to operate the offense that way. Now, you brought in Nate Solder. You made him, at the time, the highest paid tackle in football. What that's going to do is that's going to allow the Giants to protect one-on-one on the left side of the offensive line and slide that center to the right side. And hopefully you'll be able to hide some of Eric Flowers' deficiencies through scheme and formation. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I also had a chance to get some insight from Eli on what this offense will look like with Pat Shurmur. He says they want to be more multiple in their personnel groupings, going with some 2 and 3 tight end sets, but also spreading the field and using those skill position players, the wide receivers group, which is one of the deepest groups in football. So I'm looking at them being able to attack defenses in a lot of different ways and keep people off balance. The fact that you've got Saquon Barkley in the backfield to take some pressure off of the passing game, I think with that kind of balance, this has the potential to be a really explosive offense.
Is there any question in your mind that Barkley makes an immediate impact?
Well, I think he has to. When you draft him with the 2nd overall pick, you've seen what the teams that have drafted running backs in the top 5 have been capable of doing in the past couple of years. In 2016, when the Cowboys drafted Ezekiel Elliott, what was he, 1,900 yards from scrimmage and 16 touchdowns? Leonard Fournette, 1,000 yards rushing the football last year. They made it to the AFC Championship game. You're looking for Saquon Barkley to be a force multiplier like those guys. That is the expectation when you take a running back with a top 5 pick. That's a luxury pick when you start talking about that position. To me, that's the piece that puts you over the top and makes you a championship contender. In the Giants front office minds, that has to be what they're thinking. That's why my expectations are so high for this team.
Now, when they've been great and when you guys are great, it was the defensive line got after it, right? Like, we can say all these things about Eli, and he did play great in big games, and they're known for the Tyree catch, and you can point out all the offense, but the reason that you won 2 Super Bowls was the defensive line. And, yeah, the offensive skill position looks cool, and that makes you want to draft guys for fantasy football. But for a team to win, you got to have a legit defense, and it starts up front. Compare and contrast this offensive skill group off the charts on paper. What about the defense, especially up front?
That's the one thing that concerns me. They don't have a lot of proven commodities at the edge pass rusher position. I mean, you have Olivier Vernon and a lot of other possibles. Now, you brought in Connor Barwin for depth. I think that was a sneaky good move by the Giants. He's been a consistent player on the field, but more importantly, I think he's going to be great in the locker room with those guys. You drafted Lorenzo Carter out of Georgia, athletic guy. We'll see what James Bettcher does in terms of how he deploys him, how to utilize him. But it's got to be more than just smoke and mirrors. It can't just be scheme in terms of trying to manufacture pass rush. You got to have 4 amigos that can get after it and get pressure on the quarterback without having to blitz or add extra rushers because you sell out the guys on the back end. So James Bettcher has got his work cut out for him, and that's one of the things I'm looking to see how that plays out in the preseason. That's going to tell us a lot about who the Giants have in terms of being able to get after the quarterback.
All right, CC, stick around. Coming up, why is T.O. blowing off Canton this weekend? That's next on First Things First. Here with Chris Canty on First Things First. The 2018 Hall of Fame class will be inducted this weekend with Terrell Owens not in attendance. Owens will hold his own ceremony in Chattanooga, where he played in college. And President of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, David Baker, tried to explain T.O.'s planned absence.
What he told me was that he's upset that he feels disrespected, that he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. My conversations with him, I'll tell you, they've been good, and they've been very respectful. And I disagree. I'd love for him to be here because I think he would finally get the honor that he's always wanted. Having said that, he's a grown man. I respect his decision.
CC, you played with T.O. in Dallas. Is he getting a bad rap by not attending?
I think he is getting a bad rap. Now, I don't agree with the decision for him not to attend the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but I can understand his beef that he has with the election committee in getting in on his 3rd try as opposed to having the distinction of being a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, statistically, Terrell Owens is one of the top 3 receivers that's ever lived. And so when I go back to our time as teammates in Dallas, I look at him and what type of teammate he was. And he was proactive about trying to be a good teammate, trying to have a good influence, especially on the young players. And CB, we talked about this a little bit off the air about Miles Austin's career. And there is no Miles Austin without Terrell Owens coming to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, he wanted to make sure that he did everything that he could to have his team in position to compete at the highest level. He would challenge guys to work as hard as he did. He has a legendary work ethic. Of course, he learned that from Jerry Rice. So I understand how at some of the other places he might have been polarizing, but when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, he was one of the most productive players that we had on that team, and he tried to do everything that he could to be a positive influence on that team, with especially the young players. I look at his decision not to attend the Pro Football Hall of Fame as adding validity to the criticisms that he's had his entire career about being a selfish player, and I get that. I look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a museum chronicling excellence in pro football. So that means it's bigger than you. Yep. So even though you have an issue with the people that are responsible for voting on the Hall of Fame, you still have a responsibility to the fan base, to the players that preceded you, to make sure that you are there to be celebrated. And you don't want to detract from the other guys going into that class. You guys know what they call the man or woman who graduates last in medical school? Doctor. Doctor. You know what they call the player who's inducted in the fourth time around to the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Hall of Fame. They call you a Hall of Famer. Yep. Suck it up and show up. Right? That's really what it is. I mean, look, Isaac Bruce is fifth all time in pass receptions in NFL history. Fifth. He's not in. Okay? And if he gets in, he'll show up and he'll talk about how he'll be gracious about it. And that's what's lacking with Terrell Owens. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he doesn't belong in, but Cece, you nailed it, man. He's living down to his reputation, whereas he has a chance to, was it in Dumb and Dumber, totally redeem himself. Mm-hmm. Right? Completely. Just when I think Terrell Owens couldn't do anything more egomaniacal than tell us he could run the 4-4 or maybe we want to go play in football, then he totally redeemed himself and shows up in Canton and is gracious and is thoughtful and presents a speech that tells you just how troubled a life he had and how much football meant to him and how much it meant to him to play for historic franchises like the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, and what it was like to play in the Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles. But instead, he's not going to be mentioned except for all the shows leading up to and all the shows afterwards. And it's overshadowing, dude, Ray Lewis is going in, right? The nastiest linebacker and one of the greatest leaders in the history of the National Football League. Nobody's talking about it. Brian Urlacher, a signature middle linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Nobody's talking about it. This is typical T.O. And as much as I know there are players that like him, there were quarterbacks that struggled to deal with him. There were coaches, there were front office people that struggled to deal with him. It ended bad everywhere he went, and you're starting to see some of the reason why. And unfortunately, he is just keep throwing wood into the fire, and this is the lasting and indelible image of who he is when he gets inducted and he no-shows and does his own ceremony in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Well, the thing that seems to upset him more than anything is this, what he would say, misperception that he was a bad teammate. Not many people have heard what you just said, you know, because most people think of him as a terrible teammate. As you said, it has ended badly in a lot of places, but this would have been the chance to change it all. This could have been the beginning of having a new image, as we said earlier. A lot of players who had problems in all sports while they were playing, Alex Rodriguez. You know, I mean, with the steroids and all of that. And now through his work out on the camera after the game, playing the game, he's becoming beloved and a staple of the game. I mean, you can go on and on with guys who've done that, Michael Irvin and others. This could have been that moment for T.O. Like you said, he has had an incredibly rough upbringing. Yes. You know, the stories about his dad and not really knowing his father, and he, you know, was right across the street or in the neighborhood. Like, sharing some of that, a lot of people would have seen, okay, I get maybe why he's so sensitive or why this or why he did that. And that could have begun to change his image and maybe, you know, helped him out going forward.
T.O. has said that he'll later explain or come out with more details why he's making this decision. But, Cece, having played with him, having more insight than most of us do you think he'll later regret this decision?
You know what? It's one of those things where you have to think that down the road he'll say, I missed the moment to be celebrated in Canton with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he'll be invited to be a part of that celebration every single year because he's going to be a Hall of Famer after this weekend. And I'm looking at this situation for T, and I'm saying to myself, okay, I understand that there are some issues with the selection committee. That should be highlighted because they used the opportunity to vote on his status as a Hall of Famer as an opportunity to get back at him. And I feel like that's unfair because their responsibility is to the fans and to the game and to the Hall of Fame. And in no world is Terrell Owens not a Hall of Famer. So you can point to all the different issues that he had in the respective locker rooms where he played, but that doesn't take away from what he did on the field. And he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame based on his merits on the field. So I've got a little bit of issue with the selection committee and how they did that. But when looking at that situation, and I heard Shannon Sharpe put it best, CB. Shannon Sharpe said that when he stood up to give his Hall of Fame speech, first of all, the speech had been writing itself for 43 years. That's what he said. And then he went on to say it was important for him to acknowledge the people that propped him up and gave him the opportunity to have success at that level. I think T is missing an opportunity to celebrate the people in his life that created the opportunity for him to be there in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I think from that standpoint, he'll regret it.
Is there anyone around him that can try and help him see this?
Well, I know he's in communication with a lot of people that are in the business or in guys that have been former teammates of his, and I'm sure that people have told him that. But he's his own man. He's going to do things his way, and you have to respect that. But I just think in this one, he's making the wrong decision.
All right, CC, we're going to have you back a little later in the show, but coming up, will Carmelo actually make the Rockets worse? That's next on First Things First.
Look at that jump.
Carmelo Anthony officially waived by the Hawks yesterday, and all signs point to him joining the Rockets. He will attempt to help Houston bring down the Golden State Warriors, which they were one game away from doing last season. Chris, will Carmelo make the Rockets better or worse?
He won't make them worse, all right? I think he'll make them better. I'm not saying he's taking them to another level. He doesn't put them equal with Golden State. But I do think he will make them better. Here's the things I like about this situation.
Hold on a second. Don't mean to interrupt you, okay? Your flow there for a second. Okay. But you just said you think it'll make them better, but they won't be on a level better than or at with Golden State Warriors. They were up. Weren't they up 3 games to 2?
Okay, Golden State is better than them. I think Golden State was better than them last year.
Let's clarify the question. Will he make this current roster not better than last season? Okay. Let's look at the roster.
Okay, so they didn't add him as opposed to just adding him.
Yes.
Yeah, they lost Trevor Ariza. They lost Luke.
We're not looking at last year, just right now.
I think they're better with him than without him. Let me put it that way. Here's the things I like that he adds. Mid-range game. Last year they had one player who was mid-range player, Chris Paul. Now you got 2. All right, so you don't have to just be. I know they're going to shoot a ton of threes. They're going to lead the league in three-point attempts. They're going to try to get to the lane and score on dunks and layups. But now you become a little bit more versatile and unpredictable, particularly in the playoffs. That's where I like it most. Okay, secondly, 1 year, $2.4 million. All right, Melo, I know from quotes we've seen recently, he doesn't appear to be humbled, but the fact is that is the type of contract where he doesn't go in there with a ton of leverage. He doesn't go in there, even like he went into Oklahoma City last year, as somebody people still perceive as a star. When he went to OKC, they were like the big 3, okay? Nobody's looking at this as the big 3. All right, if there's a big 3, Capella's probably the 3rd guy. I think Eric Gordon is going to score more points than Melo. So if he acts up, if he doesn't accept his role, I know you don't see it a ton where guys just flat out cut, but you could get rid of him if he was becoming a problem with your team. So I actually think that Melo could help them. And let me throw this out because I like Trevor Ariza. But even I have probably overstated the importance of his loss. He missed 15 regular season games last year. They were 14-1. And 8 of those wins came against playoff teams, including Golden State. In the playoffs, now defensively, he's always strong. But he didn't shoot it well in the playoffs, particularly in that season that series against Golden State. He shot 20% from 3.
1 of 12 in Game 7.
Yeah, so, I don't want to overstate that. They didn't lose a perennial all-star. They lost Trevor Ariza. And so I think they will be better with Melo than without him.
Look, I would agree that they're better with him than without him. I don't think they're better than last year. I think they're worse than they were last year. And I understand the tangibles of Carmelo Anthony are better than the tangibles of Trevor Ariza. But there's some intangible qualities. All of us played. All of us covered. I would rather have Ariza.
Yeah, I agree.
And look, you're right. They should, instead of shooting threes, they should forget the mid-range, throw it to him in the post. Like he can legit score down there. Like that dude is a 3-level scorer, and the best levels are mid-range and at the post. He's a dynamic scorer. But what changed for the Rockets was that they finally figured out a way to get a Mike D'Antoni team to play defense. And 1, Melo doesn't love playing defense, and 2, at just his body physically, doesn't move well laterally. He can't cover anybody. You can't hide him. Now, that's okay. You can have maybe one guy out there, but they already have James Harden, who kind of fakes it a little bit, and they funnel you back to Clint Capella. If you get two guys out there, and then there's the intangible part to it, which is if you play P.J. Tucker and Eric Gordon and Chris Paul and James Harden and Clint Capella, and he's sitting over there on the bench, is he a divisive part of your roster in important moments where you need everybody pulling in the right direction? There's a belief that the most talented teams in the NBA always win. If that was the case, then why did the Oklahoma City Thunder get beaten in 6 games by the Utah Jazz? You can't tell me lining up roster for roster, right? There's a reason Oklahoma City is much more fired up about getting Andre Robertson, who couldn't score 10 points. If you locked him in the gym by himself, they're more excited about him than they were about Carmelo Anthony. There's an intangible quality to what Ariza had, to what Robertson has, that Melo has never been able to figure out, and this is a real challenge. For his entire life, he has been the guy who, when the game's on the line, give him the ball and Melo gets a bucket. The best part of his career was when he's with the New York Knicks and it's ISO Joe, throw it to him, and everybody spreads out. And now all of a sudden, where he's seeing his contemporaries compete for titles and being given, contracts of $40 and $45 million a year, he's going to make 2.3 and be told sometimes you'll play and sometimes you won't, and oftentimes stand over there in the corner and wait for it to come to you. That's a real challenge for him mentally, and a lot of guys have failed in that challenge in the past.
So we saw in the postseason his body language on the bench when Jeremy Grant was closing out games instead of him. Obviously a big reason why he had stated he wanted to leave to OKC. It wasn't a good fit, but he made it clear he would not take on a bench role. Do you think this has changed for him? Do you actually believe that his mentality will be different, whether, he may, with Ariza gone, he may start now, but if he is on the bench or if he is not closing games, does his attitude
That's
change?
the million-dollar question. And it's up to him how he finishes his career. Seriously, because if he hasn't changed his mentality, then he may get cut. We saw it happen with Allen Iverson. Now, I don't think it'll happen 8 games, 3 games into the season or whatever happened with Iverson in Memphis. But Allen Iverson could not adjust mentally.
It's hard.
Could not accept I'm no longer the superstar. He always thought of himself like that. And I agree, it's tough. But Melo, look, we've seen it happen. Bill Walton, Bob McAdoo, Ray Allen. You can age gracefully, Paul Pierce, if you accept that you're not what you used to be. Nobody's going to look at Melo in his 16th year and say, oh, you're only averaging 12 points a game, and sometimes you're on the bench at the end of the game, and hold it against him like he wasn't a great player. I think he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I know you don't, but his career is not going to be tainted in the least bit by what happens in Houston unless he goes in there with a bad attitude, can't accept the role, and then causes havoc and maybe gets cut.
Here's the last part, okay, is Tommy Lee and Pam got back together. That didn't work. The idea that Mike D'Antoni and Carmelo Anthony, who have a bad history together, it's going to come back and work, especially when Mike D'Antoni has continued to have his career elevated. Mike D'Antoni is really won everywhere he's been. He won in Italy. He didn't win a championship.
New York and L.A.
Okay, New York and L.A. It didn't work. Worked in Denver for a while. Yeah. Actually, they're actually better. They were bad, and then they started to get a little bit better. But I mean, look, he's been a really good regular season coach and gotten to a limit. Whereas Carmelo Anthony, his career's kind of taken a mercurial path. The idea that they're going to get back together, and now Melo's going to face, I think, the greatest challenge to his ego in his career.
Yes, no question.
That's a really hard thing.
The question is, why did D'Antoni let it? Now, I'm surprised, because you're right, it was terrible in New York. And D'Antoni knew he wanted Melo at the three-point line, and Melo kept inching into that little elbow area where it's his sweet spot. Why did D'Antoni bring him in unless he thinks somehow that it can work? I'm sure he talked a lot with Chris Paul about
D'Antoni was in the conversation for Coach of the Year. I think D'Antoni's fine with it. To me, it's the flip side of things.
Well, but D'Antoni he knows Melo's ego. He knows Melo did not fit into his offense or even want to play it in New York. Now, the difference then was Melo had all the leverage. D'Antoni wasn't. They weren't winning. Exactly. Melo was the superstar. Now it's kind of flipped where D'Antoni has the leverage because you're not getting rid of him.
Got hand in the relationship.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be interesting.
If it works, and if not, then he's the one that's
I hope they just short leash. Seriously.
Coming up, LeBron James. He doesn't want to hear anything about rebuilding. Hear it from him next on First Things First. say what? Steelers have opened up training camp, and of course, their fans are excited. Check out how pumped this guy is.
I love the Steelers. It's awesome to be here. I love this place because I'm a big Steelers fan. I love football. Woohoo!
I love that kid.
I
love that kid.
That's kind of how you show up every morning.
I absolutely. Why not?
I love this place.
I love debate.
I do. Right? I love sports.
That's actually very true. Yes. All right, time for some stories to start your morning. The Nationals have made Bryce Harper available in trade talks ahead of today's 4 p.m. deadline. Harper has struggled this season, hitting just .220, but he does have 25 home runs. Doug, do you think that Bryce Harper gets traded?
Yes. I absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they make him available the last day before the trade deadline. Yeah, their relationship status is complicated, right? If you go, there's been something amiss with the Nationals for years. I compare them on radio to Halle Berry, right? Like, she's beautiful, she's talented, and yet why isn't she in more movies? They're incredibly talented. They have
Max Scherzer is a free agent.
Max Scherzer is as accomplished a pitcher as there is in baseball. He's worth every penny. They have a stellar rotation. They got a great lineup, and yet here they are back around 500, and they're going to trade Bryce Harper. Yeah, you got to get something. Look, you can still sign him in the offseason. You can still move mountains, and he's a free agent. So you
can see them trading. I know that, but you can see them trading him for the next few months and then re-signing him?
No, I don't think they're going to re-sign him, but you can. It's not against the rules. The Yankees did it, a couple years ago, last year with their closer. So, I mean, it happens. The point, though, is this season is going nowhere. Shake up the clubhouse. Get rid of Bryce Harper. And let's see if you can get some quality prospects in return, you absolutely do it.
If I think he's part of the future, because, look, they're only 5.5 games out of first place. All right.
Yeah, but how many teams have to leapfrog to get there?
They're about, well, in their division, they're 5. They got one team in front of them to leapfrog. But if you think he's part of the future, then I think you keep him. But it looks like all signs are pointing to him going elsewhere in free agency, and then you have to get some value for him. So I think they have to move him.
Sam Darnold finally showed up at Jets camp after signing his rookie deal. When Todd Bowles was asked about his rookie QB, the head coach said, quote, "I told him he was late." Chris, any chance that Darnold could win the starting job?
Sure. I mean, it's not like he has Ben Roethlisberger in front of him. I mean, Josh McCown is just sitting there waiting for somebody to take the spot from him. Teddy Bridgewater, the health, I mean, how much he holds up. That's who I'd like to see start because I really liked him when he was in Minnesota. I thought he had all the intangibles you want in a starting quarterback. I think he'd be a great mentor until Bradford's ready. But it may be McCown. But, look, it's an open competition, and we've seen a lot of young quarterbacks come in now and start right away and actually play well right away. So Darnold could start. I don't think he will be the week 1 starter, but I certainly think he has a chance.
I love, there's 2 parts of that moment that we're watching that I just loved. One, he hops into jumping jacks. Like, they still do jumping jacks? Like, man. And they were the most half-hearted jumping jacks ever. Well, actually 3 parts. Second, look at that huge melon. It is gigantic. It really is. But watch Josh McCown. Like, the dude just gets it. Johnny Manziel said if Josh McCown was there when he first got to the Browns, he thinks he never would have had the issues that he ended up having. He's an incredible leader, and he totally understands what it means to be the vet that ultimately hands the football to the younger guy. Here's Sam Darnold, who held out for no real reason at all, and yet he embraces him immediately. I think it's McCown's team. Wouldn't be surprised if they give Bridgewater a look if they can't trade Bridgewater, because Bridgewater was their backup plan. But you don't move heaven and earth and move up in the draft to get the 3rd pick, to get Sam Darnold that should have gone number 1 overall and not play him. They play him eventually, but he's a guy who's also more of a gamer than a practice player. Case in point, he didn't win the job at SC 2 years ago. You got to see it in a game to understand all the little things that he does, and I think they'll ultimately do that midway through the season.
To the NBA, Dwight Howard says he chose the Wizards over the Warriors in free agency. He said John Wall's pitch helped sway him to Washington. Chris, are you buying this from Dwight?
I'm buying that the Warriors call, doing their due diligence. And to be honest, they have a strong locker room, and that's where Dwight really has had his issues, is in the locker room with his teammates. They probably have confidence that they had a strong enough locker room to get him under control and handle him. We've seen him do it with JaVale McGee and Nick Young and some guys like that. And again, if he would just focus on what he does well, rebounding and defense, he could have been decent in Golden State and given them another element to their game. But hopefully he'll do that in Washington. Because John Wall, Bradley Beal, Dwight Howard, that's not a bad trio in the Eastern Conference as long as Dwight's not crying for post-ups and bothering people in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, as long as John Wall, whatever he did before he took that picture for Team USA, as long as he doesn't do that during the season, I think they got a chance to be pretty good. Remember, what the Wizards have done is they essentially traded Marcin Gortat, and in his place, they got Jeff Green Jeff Green to come back home at a small sum, and they got Dwight Howard at $5.3 million. So if he just has his hands up and catches when John Wall passed the ball, I think it'll be a successful fit if you have reasonable expectations.
Last, we have a big story off the court. LeBron James made a decision this summer to join the Lakers. However, he hasn't forgotten his hometown. Yesterday, he opened up the I Promise School for at-risk youth in Akron, Ohio. Chris, what did you make of this latest accomplishment for LeBron?
Oh, this was fantastic. I mean, you saw how excited LeBron was. I think he called it maybe the greatest achievement of his career. I think LeBron is in many ways set a blueprint, a new blueprint for African-American athletes and what they can and I would say should do to help their communities. You know, back when, a lot of people have looked at him and even LeBron said he'd like to be like Muhammad Ali, a global icon. In Muhammad Ali's day, just speaking out was an act of bravery for African Americans at that time. And that's what Ali mainly did, and Bill Russell and Jim Brown and guys like that. Now, speaking out is not just what we need. We need action. And this is action. I mean, the way the school, it's a longer school year than your average public school. The kids, it's a longer school day. He wants to create a family atmosphere. Again, I would like to see, there are some, Jalen Rose has a school. There are athletes who've done schools, David Robinson in the past. But I would like to see more athletes, because this isn't all just LeBron. He's partnered with the Akron public school system. He's partnered with the University of Akron to send these kids to college if they get through his school on free scholarship. So a lot of athletes could do this, and I would hope, LeBron's been a trendsetter in a lot of ways. I would love to see this become a trend for other African-American athletes.
I mean, it's spectacular. It's really amazing. Even the detail to which one of the things that he remembers most fondly about his childhood was riding his bike to school was kind of his escape. So every kid who goes to school, in addition to getting free lunch, free meals, they get a free bike. I mean, it's incredible, incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking. It makes you go out and I want to do something, because we are in a time to which, forget what you say, it's what you do.
Yep.
It's your actions, not your words. And his actions are of somebody who wants to legitimately make a difference in people's lives and in the country, which is what we need more of. So this is, I don't think without any question, the greatest accomplishment of his life outside of his family, right? Taking his own family from poverty in Akron to ultimately being a billionaire. It's amazing the effect that he's going to have on generations to come. And then I was even, the only critical thing I could find was, man, you're starting school at the end of July? But there's a logic to it, right? Yeah. The more you keep kids in school, the more it keeps them out of trouble. The more there is cohesion and other things to do. And it's not just about being book smart. It's about being well-rounded. So there's a lot of thought, time, and effort that he and all the people that put this school together. And it's a huge challenge. You've been able to raise kids that are going to great universities. And I want to steal some of your knowledge. But the idea that a guy who didn't go to college and understands the value of education for an entire community is something that should not be lost on us today.
Yeah, this will be his greatest legacy. But we are going to go back to LeBron James on the court. Despite the abundance of young talent on the roster and the Lakers not making the playoffs the last 5 seasons, LeBron says he is looking to hit the ground running in year 1. Take a listen.
I don't feel like this is even a rebuilding, year for us. We have an opportunity to do something that a lot of people don't think we can do. And we love the notion of it. It's another rebuilding year, and we don't have enough. So, that will motivate the guys that we have anyways.
Doug, do you agree with LeBron that this won't be a rebuilding year?
Well, I mean, if you want to get down to the nuts and bolts of what rebuilding year would be, right, that would be going down before you go up, whereas I think it's a building year. And look, we're all sitting here and we're going to say they're not going to beat the Warriors, they're not going to beat the Thunder, they're not going to beat the Rockets. But you got LeBron James who, I mean, didn't he just take, you know, the Cavs roster of a bunch of different parts? Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, Tristan Thompson. You know, Tristan Thompson with the Kardashian issues and J.R. Smith being J.R. Smith. And, hell, they should have beat Golden State game 1.
Yeah.
They could have beat him game 3.
Exactly.
Right? So in spite of the fact he lost Kyrie Irving, so we can say it makes no sense for him to think that they can compete with the Warriors. But he's been to the finals how many straight years with all those different parts? I think it's a building year, not a rebuilding year. And I know that's semantics, but I think that actually matters to somebody like LeBron. And I think that you can tell him he can't, but there's nothing in his career since he originally left Cleveland that would allow you to believe he can't recreate Miami. He can't recreate Cleveland in a completely new sense. And I find it a challenge, and a challenge is what a guy like this needs to go to work every day with great energy and enthusiasm. So I think it's more of a building year in which they will be more competitive than people think, but maybe it's me getting lost in the semantics of building as opposed to rebuilding.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there's no way this is a rebuilding year. Maybe last year was a rebuilding year for the Lakers, where a rebuilding year is if you don't make the playoffs, you're okay with it. If they don't make the playoffs, now it won't be a disaster if they don't make it because you get rid of the vets on one-year deals and maybe you bring in a Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, whoever. So it wouldn't be a disaster, but it would be an abject failure.
It would be, but isn't that a disaster?
No, well, disaster.
Now I'm challenging your semantics.
I say it wouldn't be a disaster because you could change it like that. You just get rid of
if
Lance
they don't make the
Stevenson
playoffs,
and all those guys.
if they don't make the playoffs, Luke's getting fired, right? Luke's getting fired.
Yeah.
All those guys are
That's
gone.
not a disaster. I mean, Luke Walton's not Phil Jackson, not Steve Kerr.
I understand,
so
but
my point is
abject failure, and it would be bad.
You could change it quickly.
Okay.
If you miss the playoffs and bring in Kevin Durant, nobody's like worried. Okay, or Kawhi Leonard or whoever.
No, so but the season would be a disaster.
It would be, like I say, it would be a big failure.
Okay.
It'd be a big failure if they miss the playoffs. But this is a building year. As you said, you got all these young guys around LeBron. I mean, last year they won 35 games with Lonzo and some other guys being hurt and missing a good chunk of games. I got some numbers here, and talking to some people close to LeBron, they think Brandon Ingram could play like a Scottie Pippen role. Now, that might sound crazy to some people that just see him as a forward. But last year, you know, Doug, a lot of times the Lakers have felt like he could play point guard. Correct. And he did in the last few months of the season at maybe point forward. Yes. His numbers, 17.5 points over the last 2 months, 54% shooting, 51% shooting from 3, and 6 assists, 5.5 assists a game. So he's a versatile player. No, this is not a rebuilding year. This is a year in which I think they could make some noise. They should make the playoffs and make some noise in the Western
Conference. Is it safe to say feel-out year? We know how LeBron takes playoff series. His game ones are feel-out games for him. Is this a feel-out year?
I think that's a great point because
how they play, who he wants, the personnel on the team.
Well, remember Magic Johnson set the bar low, and he said like we could get off to a slow start. Now, I think that's what he's like.
LeBron's teams have in new places,
right? That he's going to. It's going to be a feel-out situation. I think that it's really important that when everybody looks at the Lakers roster last year, and you're like, okay, well, Ingram is this. Like, nobody stays the same. One, you added in a great player who's also a great passer and a willing passer at that. Secondly, Brandon Ingram's 20 years old. It's reasonable that he will be a better player in year 3 than he was year 2, right? Josh Hart, it's in his second year. He was the MVP of Summer League. He's going to be better. Contavious Caldwell-Pope, who's a veteran in this league, but he had a year in which he started off being suspended because of the DUI. Then he couldn't travel to road games because he was essentially on house arrest, you know, when he was with the Lakers. It's reasonable to expect his second year in L.A. will work out better than his first year. Lonzo's going to be better in year 2 than it was in year 1. My point is that no one stays the same. You get better, or maybe you start to age and you get worse. And I think it's reasonable to expect that these young players get better, 1, because of maturity, 2, because they have an outstanding player development program, and 3, because they're playing with LeBron James. And so I do think they're a little bit better then people will give them credit.
The interesting thing for me is going to be to watch LeBron in the West, night in, night out. Now, a lot of people, one of his
I feel bad for Nick Wright. Poor Nick is going to be staying up all night, watching the games, come in completely just punch drunk from watching. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of his great claims to fame is 8 straight appearances in the finals. And fact is, if he was in the West, it wouldn't have been 8 straight.
Correct.
It would have been like 2. I mean, that's how many he won during that 8-year stretch of going to the finals. So, that's what I want to see. In the East, he could take anybody and get them to the finals. What's that look like in the West? I've said throughout the prime of his career, he could go to any team in the league and make it a contender. Now, let's see what he does with this, because it's not.
Let's see if those words ring true.
Yeah, especially at this stage of his career, can he do that with these guys? I mean, look, that Cavs team that just went to the finals probably would have went out in the first round in the Western Conference.
They nearly went out in the first round of the Eastern Conference.
Right,
the Pacers almost beat. I mean,
so
7 games.
It's going to be a greater challenge for him out West, and I want to see how that.
But you're predicting MVP for LeBron.
Yeah, I'm predicting 53 and the MVP.
Don't worry,
you gotta win 50
there's nobody
plus.
recording this show.
You have to win 50
won't
plus.
live forever.
Can
You're not
Carson
going with me?
Wentz put together another MVP caliber season? That's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. Super Bowl champ Chris Canty is back with us. You guys done talking Knicks, Yankees?
Yeah, we
I don't think there was a lot of Knicks talk. Listen, I was born in the Bronx, so I feel like I can say we with the Yankees. I don't cheer for any pro football teams. I played for 3 different teams, but when it comes to baseball, I say
I'm just not used to
like
great athletes saying we, because I always thought the if a guy comes up to you and says, "Man, we won that Super Bowl, man, we were awesome," you're like, "Man, were you at 2-a-days? I don't remember you."
Yeah, they weren't with me shooting in the gym, but I get it. When you start talking about fandom, I don't understand it with football because I was in it. But when it comes to baseball, I turn into fanboy a little bit.
All right, so
I feel like I have the right to, though.
You still were a pro athlete.
Yeah.
So I think the Yankees would cut him slack. They'd be like, he knows about it.
The Yankees will bring you out for BP.
No, I was actually at C.S. Sabathia's charity softball game a couple of weeks ago.
That's why it says
Huh? And? You hit any out?
No, I didn't hit any out. I had a grounder and got thrown out at first. But, I mean, as long as I made contact and didn't embarrass myself. Listen, man, as long as I didn't embarrass myself and I showed some semblance of being a former athlete, I'm good with that.
So what you're saying, this is important. Hold on. This is way more important than the rest of the show and the run-up. Sorry. Okay, have you thrown our first pitch yet?
No, I have not thrown out a first pitch.
We
got to make that happen. Somehow, some way, it's got to happen.
Would you get it over the plate?
Absolutely.
A lot of guys have said that.
No. I wouldn't go 50 Cent with the opening pitch.
Okay.
I would actually get that done.
Okay.
Hashtag Chris Canty.
I'd rather have Romine catching than Gary Sanchez, though.
Let's talk Carson Wentz. He was the leading candidate for MVP before getting hurt last year. Wentz has always set week 1 as the goal for his return, but he admitted he can't say 100% that he will be out there to open the season. Head coach Doug Peterson says he sees a little hesitation in his quarterback. Chris, what are fair expectations for Carson Wentz coming off a torn LCL and ACL?
Well, I think it's going to take some time before we see the Carson Wentz that was playing at an MVP caliber level back when he got hurt against the Los Angeles Rams. I think that was the 13th game of their season. Mm-hmm. But he's thrown 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, almost 3,300 yards. I mean, he was on his way to becoming the MVP last year before he got hurt. I don't think we can expect that Carson Wentz this season, and it usually takes about a year before you're fully recovered from an ACL, LCL tear in the knee. But I think that Carson Wentz has that internal motivation just based on what happened last year, seeing your backup go 5-1 and be crowned Super Bowl MVP. Real or not, I think there could be the perception that Carson Wentz was more of a passenger on one of the most talented teams in the NFL rather than the straw that stirs the drink. So I think that Carson Wentz will come in with that chip on his shoulder, and you're starting to see that play out because he didn't start training camp on the puppy list. Like, he was an active participant the first day of training camp. So you can see that he wants to push the envelope. He wants to get back sooner rather than later. I think it's the responsibility of Doug Peterson, that coaching staff, and the medical staff to make sure that you hold the reins in on Carson Wentz, just because you do have a capable backup in Nick Foles that can hold it down until Wentz is fully healthy and ready to go.
I agree with that. I mean, you don't have to rush him back. That's the good news for the Eagles is you could sit him out the first few games and be fine with Nick Foles. But what I like about Wentz, I think he has all the intangibles to come back from something like this. He's physically tough. He's a warrior. He's a fighter. I mean, you saw that on the play he got injured. I mean, his warrior spirit is what got him hurt. And, you know, I think he has those intangibles. His work ethic, he's high character guy, so you know he's going to be working hard, doing everything he can to get ready. And then, like you said, the motivation, when a team wins a Super Bowl without you, and then your backup is the MVP, I mean, inside, you got to be motivated to come out and play well. And I actually think when he gets out there, he's going to play well. I don't think it'll have to be a year before we kind of see some of what we saw last year. I think once he gets out there, whenever that is, that he will play well.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, they lose Frank Reich, they lose the offensive coordinator, lose their quarterback coach. It's going to look a little bit different, even if Doug Peterson obviously still, as a former quarterback, still has command and control of that offense. Look, I'm fascinated, though, by when you put him back in. It's a lot like the Deshaun Watson, right? Deshaun Watson's gone through two of these things. Two guys, super talented, future of your franchise, and short term you want them to play, and they want to play because they're competitors. And they're telling themselves that forget about the knee, I can overcome it. It's all a mental game. But there is a physical aspect to it. How do you think you should balance that when you're a quarterback and you should have a 20-year career, but you feel internal pressure and external pressure to get back out there maybe before you actually should?
Well, I think it's the organization's job to protect the player from himself, because the player is going to push the envelope because, as you mentioned, guys are competitive. So Carson Wentz wants to get back out there as soon as possible, but they've got to make sure that he's ready to go 100% physically. And right now, I don't think that's a fair expectation to think that he's going to be 100% 8 months removed from ligament surgery on his knee. That's just ridiculous. That's not how it works. So there is a time aspect to this thing, but based on the talent that they have on this team, they're going to be competitive from week one. It's just a matter of when you, like you said, when you insert Carson Wentz into the starting lineup.
What about the other part about, how much you scramble? I mean, look, we can only protect you when you're in the pocket, dude. And when he got hurt, when he's diving into the end zone, how do you manage that? You want to maintain that. It's like throwing in interceptions, right? Yep. You still want to be aggressive with your throws. You just can't be careless. You still want to be aggressive with how you move in and around the pocket, but you can't be careless. How do you manage that?
Well, you got to have to let Doug Peterson negotiate that through the play calling. And a lot of that is getting the ball out of Carson Wentz's hand and into the hands of the playmakers, not having a lot of those read options built in, but more of the RPOs, what we saw with Nick Foles, that read action and then those quick throws off of that. I think that's the best way to protect Carson Wentz, because if he's going to sit there in the pocket, then if things break down around him, he's shown that he's going to escape and he's going to try to buy time. And that's when you get those big hits on quarterbacks. So I think the way to protect him is early on when he's in the game, get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible and get it to those other guys. Let them do the heavy lifting in the offense.
Now, I was going to say, you said you don't expect him to be, what he was last year when he plays this year. Let's say he comes back and he's well enough to play, but he's not playing at a really high level. Do you go with Foles if you're the Eagles? Like how do you?
No, I don't think you can go back and forth.
Okay.
I mean, when Carson Wentz is inserted in the starting lineup, you got to roll with that because he's your future franchise quarterback.
And he's not playing that well, and it may be because of the injury, but he's not playing that well. You just stick with him.
Well, I don't think he should be starting week one. I don't think he should play in the first month of the season. I mean, I think this is going to take some time because it is a serious knee injury. You give it as much time as you possibly can, and then you put him back into the starting lineup. Now, the Eagles are expecting to compete for a championship because this is one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. So there are some gymnastics in terms of trying to decide when the right time to put Carson Wentz in as the starter, when that is. But once he's back in there, I don't think you can go back and forth between Wentz and Foles. That's why I think you have to give it as much time as possible and let him be as healthy as possible.
All right, Cece, thanks so much for being here. Coming up, you're not going anywhere.
No, I'm right here.
Don't move.
That's what we like. Tom Brady might not even be close to slowing down. We'll explain that next on First Things First. Back here with Chris Canty, and we are talking Patriots. At the end of his documentary, Tom vs. Time, Brady put fear in the hearts of Pats fans when he said, when you lose your conviction, you probably should be doing something else. However, he seems to have changed his tune at training camp, saying, quote, I guess that you could say I found my conviction. It's football season. Let's go. Chris, when do you expect that time will finally catch up with Tom Brady?
Right now, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I mean, just watching him play at an MVP level at the age of 40 and what he did with that team last year, I mean, it was impressive. I mean, he was literally, a strip sack away from leading his team on a game-winning drive in the Super Bowl against the best defense in the National Football League. So, I mean, I look at Tom Brady and I said he's playing as good as he ever has, and he's playing at the highest level in terms of quarterbacking that we've seen in the NFL. So, I mean, I don't know when it's going to catch up with him. I know it eventually will happen, but I don't think it'll happen this season, and I'm not sure what happened the season after this, just based off of the sample size that we got last year.
I understand NFL players don't like rule changes, the safety changes. Okay, I understand they played football one way their entire life, and it's really hard to change. Okay, but just look at the quarterback position and what they've been able to do in helping quarterbacks extend their careers. Brady's unbelievable, but he's not the only quarterback who's into his late 30s. I mean, Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees. I mean, I think this is going to be a trend to which guys' careers are going to be in the 15 to 20-year variety if they take care of themselves the way that he does, and they have a quarterback coach or an offensive coordinator, a head coach that give him a supporting cast. I mean, I think that's the most interesting part, but it really is remarkable that many of our colleagues in sports media have been saying, hey, the decline's coming, the decline's coming, the decline's coming. And it's like the stock market. It keeps, you look up, you're like 25,000, 24,000, 25,000. It keeps going up. So I'm not going to be the one that calls it. It's going to happen eventually. But I like the fact that they went out and added Jordan Matthews. I like the fact that they drafted Braxton Berrios, the kid out of Miami who feels like he's kind of a Swiss Army knife. You can put him a bunch of different places. I like that they went out and got Sony Michel, who gives them kind of two dynamic backs in the backfield. Like, they're giving him a supporting cast. And as long as you protect him, the rules are allowing quarterbacks to play longer. And it's obvious that he still has his motivation. There's no reason to believe he can't play a couple more years.
Well, he certainly still has the motivation, and that's the key thing. And look, you mentioned the rules changes, but let's face it. I mean, nutrition, the way guys are training now. I mean, there's just more knowledge out there regarding these things. So really, we don't know. I mean, we're going based off the past. Whether it's talking about him, talking about LeBron James, whoever, we're looking at precedents and saying nobody's ever done this, nobody's ever done that at this age. But he's shattering all of that. Based on the past, again, I would think 2 years still at the top of his game or close, and then you'll start to see a decline. Now, I have no reason to think that from when I look at him on the field. Because on the field, like you said, he looks as good as ever. You would never think he's only got 2 years left based on that. But at some point, age has to kick in, you would think, unless he's going to do something that basically we've all thought for ever since they've been playing football was impossible.
Well, and Chris, that's the thing. When I look at Tom Brady, and Doug, you mentioned those other quarterbacks that are aging a little bit, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, I feel like Tom Brady is playing at a higher level than both of those guys. And you can kind of see some deterioration in the skill sets of Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers. They don't have the same zip on their passes that Tom Brady does. But when you look at Tom Brady, I mean, in terms of arm talent, there's no difference in him now than a decade ago.
And playing in bad weather.
And playing in bad weather. And you talked about the skill position players, but I don't think this group of skill position players is as talented as the group that he took to training camp last year. So I'm looking at,
never had. Other than
when he had Randy Moss, and you see what he did with that situation. He lit him up. They had over 20 receiving touchdowns right there. I mean, it was unbelievable. A historically great offense. I mean, that's what Tom Brady is still capable of doing with the supporting cast, with the right talent around him. And you mentioned Sony Michel. They also drafted Isaiah Wynn to help mitigate the loss of Nate Solder. But Tom Brady is the definition of a force multiplier. He's going to elevate the play of everybody around him, and it's going to be not just the offensive unit. It's going to be all three phases of the football team, defense and special teams included.
So what about his weapons, though? His receiving core, he's without Julian Edelman for the first month of the season. What are fair expectations for him or for this offense?
Well, I think Bill Belichick will make it work. He always has with the players that he has on his roster. So he'll find a way to put together the different parts and be able to manufacture offense, whether it's being reliant on the running backs as receivers out of the backfield, whether it's focusing on creating the mismatches for Gronkowski in the passing game or, being able to take advantage of the mismatches with the slot receivers in the intermediate passing zones. Those are the types of things that Bill Belichick will figure out. And it's a game plan offense. So it's one of those situations where from game to game, they're going to recognize the deficiencies in the other team's defense, and they're going to exploit them. That's what Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels always consistently do. So I don't expect anything different in this season. So even though the receiving core might not be as talented as Tom Brady has had in the past, they'll find a way to make it work.
Do you think if they, like in his latter years, whatever that is, if they brought in more talent at the skill positions, that could prolong his career even further?
I absolutely do.
Maybe that's something they should look to do.
Yeah, because, it's talks about trying to ask Tom Brady to do too much. They already put a lot on him. I think that as he gets a little bit older, there's the expectation that the skill set is going to be on the decline. And when that happens, you need other players in that offense that are capable of being difference makers. Right now, I only feel like you have two guys on that offense outside of Tom Brady that are capable of doing that. That's Gronkowski and the rookie Sony Michel.
So with that being said, how many more years does he need to be playing at this high of a level to justify the Jimmy Garoppolo trade?
Well, I think you've got to get at least a couple of more seasons out of him. Now, when you look at the decision to move on from Garoppolo, they were going to be forced to decide something definitively with the quarterback position just because Jimmy G was going to command so much on the open market this offseason. So they had to make a decision. Bill Belichick called it an unsustainable situation when they made the deal with San Francisco. So they had to make a decision. They decided to go with the guy that they know is capable of winning Super Bowls in Tom Brady. So I think he owes it to the franchise to at least commit to a couple of more seasons with them.
Look, the one part I would disagree with is the idea of the quote-unquote maybe more athletic talent outside the numbers. I guess we're right. The problem is, they went out last year and got Brandon Cooks, and that sort of worked, right? Yeah, sort of worked.
Well, when you look at the numbers, they're better than you would think they were.
No, I understand, but there's a reason they moved on from him.
Sure.
Right? You go back even when they brought Chad Ochocinco in. To them, it's more about, can you play within this offense than it is, do you have, pure talent? And that's why a Jordan Matthews, a Vanderbilt kid who they feel like could play within the offense, can understand the nuances of what they're looking for, is more important than does a guy have great top-end speed or Hall of Fame caliber talent. Oh, yeah, by the way, those Hall of Fame caliber talented wide receivers aren't really available. They're not really out there. Would you love to put an Antonio Brown with him? Sure. Would you like to put they can go they can go get a Dez Bryant, but can Dez Bryant fit in with the Patriot way? Not just stay off of Twitter and keep his mouth shut, but can he line up in the right position? Yeah, no, can he not cut? As much as that seems, it should be. He's been in the league how long? He should be able to do it. Chad couldn't do it. They've had others that have been able to do it, and I think that's the challenge to putting somebody in that offense, in that environment, when they haven't been there before.
Well, a big part of this too. Your question, that was a great question, and look. I'm with everybody else. Garoppolo was fantastic in San Francisco last season, but a lot of this is going to be how well he plays. That was a small sample size. I know he did everything right, but if he doesn't become what we think he can become and what the 49ers think he can become, then that plays in on this situation and how we view the decision too.
Chris, thank you so much. Now we're letting you go. Unless you want to stick around and talk more Carmelo.
He does.
No, I'm all set on Carmelo. I'm all set on
Carmelo. Making a huge mistake going after Melo. That's next on First Things First. Take your pick. Carmelo Anthony was waived by the Hawks yesterday, clearing the way for him to sign with the Rockets. Some are speculating that Melo's former team, OKC, will be better off without him. So who will have the better record this season, the Rockets or the Thunder? Chris, take your pick.
I do think the Thunder are better this season without Carmelo Anthony because he wouldn't accept his role. And maybe because he had been there, he never was going to accept his role. Now you're going to a new team. Hopefully for him and for the Rockets, he will accept being a role player, not even playing at the end of some games. We'll see how many. But I think the Rockets will be better. I'm with you. I think Oklahoma City is going to be a very good team this year. and maybe do some damage in the playoffs. But I do think the Rockets will have a better record. I don't think they'll win. They won 65 last year. Mm-hmm. They won't win that, I don't believe.
No, remember, half the West was dumping games. Remember,
yeah.
Memphis
and they
won
won't even
one
go
road
for
game. In 2018, Memphis won one road game. It was in Minnesota, by the way. Memphis was dumping. Anytime they were playing well, they took Marc Gasol out of the game. I think the Thunder are actually going to be better.
Better record, too.
Yes, I really do. I think the regular season is going to matter to the Thunder. I do think that Paul George year 2 will be a lot more comfortable. Andre Robertson, we're hoping that you're hoping that he's back and he's healthy. I love Dennis Schroeder, and then you bring Grant off the bench with him, and it gives him the ability to take Russell Westbrook at least for some of the time off the basketball offensively, pressure the basketball defensively. I think Oklahoma City, regular season wise, second best team in the West.
Second, wow.
Who had the better regular season record?
Sticking with the NBA, Dwight Howard said he signed with the Wizards this offseason after talking to John Wall. But according to Dwight, the Warriors were also interested in signing him. Which would have been a better career move for Dwight, the Wizards or the Warriors? Doug, take your pick.
It's interesting because part of me wants to say the Warriors because the Warriors play basketball with joy, right? And he's always wanted to have fun when he plays. But it's just a different kind of goofy fun that no one else seems to be in on the joke. I think the Wizards are the better play here. I think John Wall will dime him up more. The way in which the Wizards play is a lot more traditional as opposed to the motion and passing game with the Golden State Warriors. I think it would have been a bad fit there on the basketball floor. I think the Wizards is a smart pick.
Look, if he had gone to the Warriors, I think because they don't really need him, or not really need him, they don't need him. And I think their culture is strong enough where they could have fit him in and he would have been fine. And I think he could have rehabilitated his image like JaVale McGee and Nick Young and a lot of guys have in Golden State because he couldn't have screwed it up, I don't believe. They wouldn't have let him. But he wouldn't have put up the individual numbers. He wouldn't have been as much of a factor. I think individually it's better for him to go to Washington because he can show with John Wall and Bradley Beal, and you're right, the way they play, that he can be a factor. He's still in the East.
Right.
And so I think he could help them maybe fight for home court advantage.
I will only disagree with you with the idea that they don't need him in the win the championship sense, but you do need a center. Like, as much as we're saying you don't need a center. You do sort of, right? Like somebody's going to have to guard DeMarcus Cousins. Obviously now DeMarcus Cousins is a Warrior. Somebody's going to have to guard Steven Adams.
If they had McGee, still had JaVale MGee, you think they would have been all right?
I think they've been okay. Yeah, you need somebody, and I do think that the center is going to reemerge in terms of his importance with the Joel Embiid, the Karl Anthony Towns, so many of these talented big guys.
All right, on to the NFL, where odds released yesterday list the Jets as the betting favorites to land Le'Veon Bell next summer. They're projected to have more than $100 million worth of cap space next offseason. Would the Jets or Steelers be a better move for L. Bell next summer? Chris, take your pick.
Well, look, if the Jets are going to break the bank, I mean, we know his whole beef with Pittsburgh has been about money. And maybe there'll be lingering feelings. You know, I have a feeling there may be some lingering feelings next summer when he is a free agent. But in that sense, you would say the Jets. And then, you know, with Darnold, you know, if they have a surprisingly good year, that could look okay. But I'm still going to go with the Steelers just because of their potential. I mean, the great wide receivers, you still got Big Ben. Obviously, Le'Veon, you know, is a great fit in that offense. If they haven't been able to reach their full potential yet, we'll see if they can do it this year. But as long as they still have all those weapons, I think if you take money out, it's Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but you can't take money out.
Well, assuming they pay him something, you know. But, yeah, if he wants to just break the bank, it's the Jets.
There you go. I mean, he's made it pretty clear that it is about respect and it is about guaranteed money and it is about contract. And if push comes to shove, the Jets will do something very Jet-like, stupid, sign a guy to a big deal when he's creeping closer to 30 years old. Now, he's super talented, but you can easily, you know, reach out and get multiple running backs like everyone else in the league is. But I do think that the Jets are trying to, as it's pointed out, clear out cap space, and that would be a smart acquisition. And, look, they're still about selling seats, and they're about protecting their young quarterback. Le'Veon Bell is super talented, but he's made it clear it's about the money, and there's more money to be made in New York.
Joe Flacco was put on notice after the Ravens drafted Lamar Jackson with the last pick of the first round. However, NFL writer Peter King reported this has been the best Joe Flacco has looked in training camp in his 11 years in the NFL. So who is a better quarterback option for Baltimore this season, Flacco or Jackson? Doug, take your pick.
It is not close. It's Joe Flacco. Look, I'm like anybody. I watched Lamar Jackson play at Louisville. He has a profound amount of ability, especially athletic ability. He's the most athletic player we've had at this position, and that's no disrespect to Mike Vick and some of the other freaks that we've had back there, but he's more freaky. But he's not refined. His football IQ leaves a lot to be desired. There's a reason that he was around so late, and he can be wildly inaccurate. Baltimore's smart. They're going to put him out in the football field. They're going to put him in as a slash. They're going to move him all over. They're going to use his athletic ability. But Joe Flacco is the better quarterback. Do I think Joe Flacco is great? No. Do I think he's a top 10 quarterback? No. But I do think now he's another year removed from having the back issue, having the knee issue a couple years ago as well. And he has complete control and command of this offense. I don't know if they have enough weaponry around him to make that incredible arm he has really look that good. But Joe Flacco is a better quarterback, and it's not really close at this stage in their career.
Yeah, I'm with you on Flacco, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he's having this great camp, as Peter King reported. Obviously, he's had some down years. The shine is kind of worn off of him. You bring in this young hot shot who, I'm with you, he's a project. He's a straight-up project, but still, he gets a lot of attention. He probably looks good in practice doing a lot of different things, and I think that's probably motivated Joe Flacco to play well so far.
Tom Brady and LeBron James continue to defy logic with their elite performances continuing in their careers. King James will be entering his 16th year in the NBA, while Tom will be in his 19th season. But which player has the better supporting cast this season? Chris, take your pick.
I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I'm going to include Bill Belichick in that supporting cast. Yeah. So I'm going with the New England Patriots, Tom Brady. I mean, Belichick is just phenomenal. And whatever they lose Gronkowski, they still win a Super Bowl. You know, you lose great receivers here and there, you just fill in, put somebody else in that spot, running back, whatever it is. I think New England definitely has the better.
And he got Josh McDaniels back, who reneged on the deal to become the Indianapolis Colts. But you did kind of bury the lead. He's got Gronk. He's got the best tight end, best pass-catching tight end in the game, maybe second best of all time to Tony Gonzalez. Incredibly dynamic. He'll get Julian Edelman back, but he's got Belichick. He's got the system. He has the better supporting cast, especially because he has years and years of history to call upon, whereas LeBron is going to have to learn about these guys, and they're going to have to grow. I think eventually LeBron will have a better supporting cast, but this year it's not really close.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.